What is up, ninjas? Kevin David with That Lifestyle Ninja, and today we are going to talk about the one strategy that I use to 10 times my results in every area of my life with the same amount of effort, and the 3 hacks that I use to increase my productivity to get things done. So don't go anywhere. What is up, ninja? So today is going to be a very good one. We are going to talk about the one thing that if you do correctly, if you do just this one thing and nothing else, right, you are going to be able to catapult yourself into millionairehood. And I'm not just saying this, I know from personal experience that if you get good at this one thing, you can completely change your life. And that thing is prioritization. Millionaires and billionaires and people who are successful in every area of life really understand how to prioritize what activities, whether it's relationships, friendships, business, from a monetary, financial perspective, which activities that they are doing personally that are giving them the most value for the least amount of effort, right? And so what we're going to talk about first is called the Pareto principle. 20% of your actions, inputs, products, services, whatever it is, will create 80% of what you want, right? So 20% of inputs produce 80% of outputs. And so what we're going to talk about is how to actually kind of understand the Pareto's law and how to apply it to your own life, whether it's from a business perspective or relationships or friendships or whatever it is, right? So let's talk about some real world cases where the 80-20 rule has actually been proven true. And this is actually very strange, guys. I know it's kind of hard to conceptualize this, but it is a real mathematical law. And so the original way that this guy, right, Vilfredo Pareto, actually started to notice the 80-20 rule was he noticed that about 20% of the pea pods in his garden produced 80% of the peas. 80% of the world's income is owned by about 20% of the richest people. 20% of a carpet gets about 80% of the total foot traffic. 20% of beer drinkers drink about 80% of the beer in the world. And I'm definitely part of that 20%. 20% of customers account for about 80% of customer service and complaints. 20% of customers account for about 80% of your revenue, right? And so we are going to actually break this down into every area of our life, right? We're going to talk about business. We're going to talk about friendships. We're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about happiness. We're going to talk about how to actually focus on that 20% that is giving you the most value, giving you the most bang for your buck. And like always, guys, we're going to try to connect the intangible with the tangible. I'm going to give you real examples of the 80-20 rule and how I actually personally apply it in my own businesses. Okay, guys, so to try to actually cement this into real life, right? Because it's very hard when it's kind of like this big concept, it's very high level. It's hard to actually see it implemented. I'm going to actually take it and I'm going to break it down in real time how I apply the 80-20 rule to my own life and to a couple of my businesses. So the first thing that we're going to start with is the Amazon FBA Ninja course. So for those of you who don't know, the Ninja course is a digital product, right? It teaches people how to kind of quit their jobs, leave their 9-to-5 grind behind, and replace their old income, right, at their corporate job with a new income, earning money online from anywhere in the world. So the Amazon FBA Ninja course, what do I have to do for this course, right? I have to market it. I have to show people what it is. I have to show people how awesome it is, right? That it actually can really change people's lives, right? And so where am I getting my traffic and sales, right? So let's say, for example, that we're going to talk about these 7 different areas, right? So Reddit, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, podcast, Facebook, YouTube. So they're all bringing me traffic. So for the sake of simplicity, let's say that I spend 1 hour on each, right? So if I'm spending 7 hours on these activities, right? So for Reddit, I'm building out content. Maybe I'm writing up a post teaching you how to find a product on Amazon. For Twitter, maybe I'm posting one of my YouTube videos, or I'm going out there and I'm following or commenting and interacting with other people in the Amazon space. Pinterest, maybe I'm going out and looking at Amazon related pins, or I'm taking pictures of my shipping containers or cartons, or maybe I'm linking to some of my YouTube videos or something like that, creating content on every single one of these platforms in different ways. So if I'm spending 1 hour on each, right, how can I tell which one to prioritize and which one to actually spend a little bit less time on? So when I actually looked at the data, I saw that Reddit, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram were bringing me about 50 people per month for the hours that I was putting in. So if I'm using equal hours on all of these different platforms, let's say that Reddit, Twitter, Pinterest, and Instagram are bringing me 50 people. Podcasts, I figured out that I was getting 100 people, right? And how am I figuring this out? You can use Google shortened links to see how many times people are clicking on your links, right? So on Instagram, maybe I post a video and I use a Google shortened link or a bit.ly or whatever you want to use, and then I can see 100 people clicked on it, right? And so I can see from Pinterest that 50 people clicked on my shortened link, Twitter 50 people, Reddit 50 people, right? So I was seeing 50, 50, 50. I was seeing 100 from Instagram. I was seeing 200 from podcasts, and I was seeing over 1,000 clicks per month from Facebook and from YouTube. So, once you actually have the data, it becomes much easier to actually start to prioritize. So if I'm spending equal time right now on all of these different sources, right? 7 hours a day on all of these different sources, but 2 of them are bringing me, more than 95% of my total traffic. What is the obvious decision here? The obvious decision is to focus all of my time instead of spending an hour on each of these, I spend, 2 hours on Facebook, 2 hours on YouTube. Now, instead of spending 7 hours a day, I'm spending 4 hours a day, right? But I'm capturing so much more value for every single one of those minutes that I'm actually spending on those platforms. So the next example that we're going to talk about is my Amazon FBA business, right? So Amazon FBA, for those of you who don't know, is sourcing products from China or from cheaper markets, bringing them, kind of doing all of the facilitation and logistics, bringing them onto Amazon.com in the US or the UK or wherever you're selling, and selling them for significantly more than you buy them for. And so what I needed to figure out is which of my product lines, right? Which of my niches, which of my actual companies and private labels were generating me the most profits, right? And that has everything to do with returns, breakages, right? Hassles. Maybe one of my specific companies had many more customer service complaints or required a lot more of my time, right? And so the decision was between my 10 different Amazon FBA accounts, which one of these, which few of these accounts were producing the lion's share of my revenue, right? And so if the Pareto's Law actually did hold true, then it would dictate that out of my 10 accounts, that 2 of them would be producing 80% of what I want, right? And what I'm after with my Amazon FBA business is long-term sustainable profit, right? And so the crazy part about this, guys, is it usually works out. And right, we're not expecting exactly 20% or anything like that, but we did actually see that, out of my 10 different Amazon FBA accounts that I do run with one of my partners, 2 of them were without a doubt creating over 80% of our profit when you take everything into account, right? So all of our different accounts are producing revenue, they are producing profits, but for one of my accounts, we sell a breakable product, right? We get a lot of returns, we have a lot that we have to deal with negative reviews, following up with our customers, right? We have to deal with a lot of breakages, and that's just lost revenue, and negative reviews are just a killer on the Amazon FBA business, right? So what we decided to do was we decided to spend more time every week, every day, right? Actually building out those two Amazon accounts that were providing the lion's share of our hassle-free revenue, right? We determined that what we were after was the least amount of time input with the most amount of profit and return, right? And so what we did was we decided to spend significantly less time on the accounts that were producing less of our revenue, less of our profits, and that caused us more headache, and to double down our efforts on the 2 accounts that were producing the lion's share of our revenue. And the crazy part about this, guys, is that it really does apply to all areas of life. And we're not expecting exactly an 80-20 split, but if you understand the principle and you really can start to apply it to different areas of your life, I promise you that you will start to see a greater output for the same or even significantly less, time required to input. Right? And so let's talk about this as from a social interaction perspective, so friendship. So let's say that, for the sake of argument, that I have 10 friends, right? So we'll say that I'm super popular for right now. So if I have 10 friends, inevitably, out of those 10 friends, 8 of them are not going to be giving me the value that I want, right? So maybe I have a friend who talks behind my back. Maybe I have a friend who is always late. Maybe I have a friend who drinks or smokes too much, or right, tries to drag me into situations that aren't necessarily, what I want to be involved in. And then I have 2 friends out of the 10, they're very happy with their own lives. They're actually genuinely happy for me when I have success, right? They're fun to be around. They're accountable. They always say what what they mean, and they're just generally a good value, and they're just a good portion of my life, right? And so the funny thing about friendships is you will start to notice, if you actually kind of have a moment of silence and give yourself a second to think, that certain friends really are giving you 80% of the value and the social interaction that you actually want, and that 80% of your friends are not providing that same level of social interaction that you're really looking for. And the same thing applies for relationships. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that I come home and I spend 10 hours with my wife or girlfriend, right? And so out of those 10 hours, maybe I'm watching TV, maybe we're watching football, maybe I'm checking Facebook on my phone, maybe I'm working on my business, right? And then after that 10 hours, she says to me, Kev, you're not giving me any attention. And I say, what are you talking about? We spent 10 hours together just now, right? And so if we did that same scenario, but I came home and only spent 2 hours with her, right? So I'm spending 8 less hours with her in this second scenario, but I really involved myself with her. Like, we just talked and we had real meaningful interaction. I wasn't constantly checking my phone. I wasn't ignoring her for the TV, right? Which of those scenarios would be more meaningful and would give the type of love and care and interaction that someone in a relationship would be looking for? And this applies to your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, whatever it is, right? The 20% of time that you're really meaningfully spending with them is worth more than if you did the 80% where you're not really kind of giving it your all and really paying the attention that they deserve. Right? And the same thing, it's this exact same thing with happiness. So out of all the different things you do, whether it's hobbies, whether it's decisions you make, right, how to spend your time, 20% of those decisions or hobbies, or what you choose to actually occupy your time with, your free time with, is going to give you 80% of your happiness. So let's say that I have 10 things that I do in my life, right? So what I've noticed is that the 2 things out of those 10 that I enjoy the most, that make me personally happiest, are 1, traveling, and 2, interacting with my students and teaching people and trying to help people kind of break free of, jobs that they feel trapped in. So those are the 2 things that make me personally happiest, right? And there's a lot of other things that I enjoy doing. I enjoy exercising. I enjoy, I enjoy going out and, drinking and partying with my friends from time to time, right? So there's a lot of different things. But if I want to focus on my fulfillment and my personal happiness and my, if I wanted to grow the most and, have the most fulfillment and happiness from these activities, I'm going to focus most of my time, most of my free time, on really honing in with a laser focus on the 2 activities that make me happiest. So I'm going to Australia in just a few weeks with one of my best friends, right? And I am constantly, adding content to YouTube that hopefully you guys find valuable. I'm constantly interacting with students. I had 2 calls with my students today in my Amazon FBA course, which is amazing. I love to see, the progress that they're personally making, that it's changing their lives. Watching their happiness really provides me with the most happiness. And, in this specific example, does that mean that I'm going to cut out exercise and all of the other 80%? No, definitely not. That's not the point of the 80-20 rule. You can't just ditch, 80% of your life. What this is about is prioritizing, most of your focus and most of your time and energy toward the 20% of activities that give you the most return. All right, so now let's talk about productivity. So this is a very, very important point, right? So prioritization is incredibly important, but if you prioritize the right things, that's amazing. But if you're not productive with your time, once you actually start those things you've prioritized, then none of it matters, right? So we're going to talk about how to mentally overcome procrastination and resistance to taking meaningful action, right? So understanding your resistance. All right, guys, so let's talk about a super, super important concept that has really changed my life. And it's what I call no 0 days, right? And so one of the things that is very, important to understand about procrastination, about human nature, right, about how our brains work, is that, when you think about a big task, for me right now, it's my Shopify course, right? I never want to do anything half-assed. I want to put out the absolute best content available anywhere with all of the most, important secret tips and tricks and real kind of implementable things, right? Nothing high level. And so when I think about that actual task, it sounds very overwhelming, right? It's very hard to sit down and say, okay, make a Shopify course, right? But when you break it down into smaller chunks, right, when you break it down into, okay, the first thing I need to do is create the skeleton, right? I need to create a Google Doc. I need to, create the 6 or 5 or however many sections there are, setting up your Shopify store, finding a product, right? Facebook ads, all of the different sections, right? Organize them in a chronological order. Then I need to actually go out and start to find all of the best tips and tricks and hacks from all the different sources, right? All of my own personal experience, and I need to organize them in order, right? And once I do that, then I can actually sit down and start to film, right? And, luckily now I have people who can help me build out the actual infrastructure from a programmatical perspective of my websites. But if I didn't, then I would just go down after I'd finished recording the videos, I'd order them, and then I'd put them into my membership portal, right? So organizing things into smaller kind of biteable chunks makes it much, much easier to actually tackle some of these things. Because let's think about this from a real world perspective, right? The hardest part of any task is getting started. Think about it from a physics perspective, right? And let's say that you are, with a merry-go-round. Is the hardest part of getting a merry-go-round going is the very beginning, right? You have to really push, and you have to actually put all of your strength into it, and then it gets a little bit easier and a little bit easier. And once it's actually spinning, then it's almost no effort at all. You can literally just do one hand, right? For all of our kind of take us back to the retro playground area, right? And the same thing holds true in many different scenarios. Think about a snowball. If you're on, a big beautiful mountain and there's snow everywhere, and you have a tiny little snowball, right? And if you roll it, it doesn't really go anywhere. But if it gets bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden you have this big, beach ball sized snowball, then all you have to do is give it a little push, and it starts to roll and gather steam and get bigger and bigger. And that's such an important point in being productive as well. So what no 0 days means is breaking that initial resistance. The hardest part about any task, about any thing that you need to do, is getting started. So let's say that you're sitting down to write a research paper, right? It has to be 20 pages long. It has to have all these citations. Thinking about it, you're just dreading it, right? You're sitting on the TV right now, or maybe you're watching this YouTube video when you should be actually working on your research paper. But what my point is, the hardest part about that entire research paper, it's not the 20 pages, it's not any of that, is getting started. And so what no 0 days means is that you never have a 0 day. It means that you go and sit down and you say to yourself, okay, I don't want to do this right now at all. I don't feel like it. I'm not in the mood, but I'm going to write one sentence, or I'm going to write my name and the date and the title of my paper, and that is all, right? But once you sit down at your computer and you write that first sentence, it feels much easier. It's a very beautiful thing. It feels much easier to maybe write a second sentence. And if that's all you want to do, then that's all you want to do, and that's okay. But you'll start to notice that if you can break that first initial mental block and you sit down and you write that first sentence, things get easier. It applies to every area of business. It's the same thing with me. If I'm going to create a YouTube video, right, I know I have to do my research. I know I have to, create a slideshow. Maybe I know I have to kind of plan out the order and flow of a tutorial that I'm doing, like for ClickFunnels or building a website or whatever it is, right? And so that sounds like a lot of work. But if I sit down on my computer and I say, okay, what's the first step? The first step is writing my skeleton. So I'm just going to write one sentence about how to use ClickFunnels to make money. I'm not going to do the whole thing right now. Maybe I'm going to go to the gym. Maybe I'm going to go hang out with friends, but I'm just going to write one sentence. So I sit down, and then all of a sudden I notice, 30 minutes later that I've written half a page, or I've written a full page, or, maybe an hour later I'm done. It's a very, important thing to realize about human nature and about our minds, and about, the thought of, impending work and being overwhelmed is very overpowering. And what a little trick that I like to use is what I call no 0 days. So just sit down and do something. Do one push-up, right? Write one sentence. Maybe make one shovel of, if you need to dig a ditch in your backyard, just do it once, and you'll notice it starts to become so much easier, guys. So the most important muscle for success is willpower. And research has shown, over and over again, that willpower is like any other muscle. The more that you express it and the more that you use it, right, the stronger that it gets. And for me personally, I know what I struggle with is waking up early in the morning. And I know that sounds petty. It's not the worst problem in the world. But for me, it's one of the things that is least productive about my life. And so what I've done is I've started to really focus on that willpower, that one thing that gets me up in the morning. Okay, I'm going to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and at 6:01, right when my alarm goes off or whatever time it is, I feel terrible. I'm exhausted. It's freezing cold outside where I am in Denver right now. That's part of the reason I'm going to Australia. But, there's so many reasons that I could just go back to sleep. It's so much easier. I don't have to be anywhere. Now that I'm an entrepreneur, I have no, obligations, quote unquote, that I used to have when I was at my corporate job. So it would be so easy for me to go back to sleep. But recognizing that willpower is a muscle and it grows and it gets stronger when you use it is a truly beautiful thing, because the first day it's so hard. It's awful. I feel like crap, right? Walking, crawling, whatever you're going to do to the shower when it's dark outside and it's cold and I could easily go back to sleep is so hard. But the second day, right, maybe it's still as hard. The third day, maybe it's still as hard. But, it starts to get easier. Maybe at day 5, maybe after I've done it for 1 week and I've woken up, at 6 a.m. every single day for 5 straight days. On that 6th day, it's easier, guys. Just trust me when I say it's easier. It's the same thing with a diet. It's the same thing with going to the gym. It's the same thing with every area of your life. When you start to, when you get through that initial resistance, right? That first few days, that first week, that first month, whatever it is, it starts to get easier and your willpower gets stronger, and then you really start to feel a more fulfilled sense of self, right? Because you've done it. You have actually exerted the willpower to make a change for the better in your life. And so the last thing that I want to talk about kind of from a productivity perspective is what I like to call the 30-31 rule and why it's important. So for the next 30 days, right, for the first 30 minutes of every day, I want you guys to focus on the one thing that is just the biggest game changer in your entire life. And what I mean by that, right, is for the next month, the first 30 minutes of your workday, whether that starts at 9 when you get to the office, whether that starts right when you wake up, if you're an entrepreneur, whether that starts, whenever it starts, for the next 30 days, the first 30 minutes of every single day, focus only on the one thing that is most important to your life, guys. And for me, that is YouTube. YouTube above all else has changed my life. It has introduced me to such amazing people. I get such amazing messages from people about how, my tutorials on Amazon or Shopify or Facebook have been so helpful to their businesses, right? I just get to meet so many amazing people, and just putting myself out there and creating content, hopefully that you guys enjoy, it makes me so happy and so fulfilled, and I really, truly, honestly love every single one of you guys watching, and I'm not just saying that, I really do mean it. And so every single day for the next 30 days, and I'm going to do this too, guys, I am going to only focus on YouTube. I'm not going to answer emails. My phone, you better believe, is going to be on airplane mode, right? I'm not going to be doing anything else. The moment that my workday starts at 8 a.m., I'm only going to focus on YouTube. I'm going to research, future video topics that I want to do. I'm going to work with my graphic artist to create me my thumbnails for my videos. I'm going to, go back and maybe optimize some of my tags or keywords or descriptions or titles to be better suited for YouTube's search algorithm. The only thing that I'm going to do for 30 minutes, for the first 30 minutes, starting today is October 27th, and okay, so till November 27th, the first 30 minutes of every single day of my life is going to be exclusively spent on YouTube. And I challenge you guys to do the same thing, because what this does, guys, is kind of in the background, it's doing a few things. It's helping you build your willpower, right? Staying true, and more importantly, it's forming the habit. So when you form habits, the biggest difference between people who are successful and those who aren't are people having productive habits. And so what the 30-31 rule does is it actually allows you to create a positive, productive habit in your own life. And so I challenge every single one of you to do the 30-31 rule. And if you want, right, I will try to hold you accountable. I promise I'm going to answer every single one of you guys' comments. I try to do that anyways. But comment below, what are you going to do for the first 30 minutes of every day for the next 30 days? What is the biggest game changer? What is the most important thing that you personally do in your life to give you the most happiness, give you the most money, to give you the most success, whatever it is, the most important thing, guys. And so last thing, most importantly, right, do not try to do everything. I'm going to repeat that one time right here. Don't try to do everything at once. I know in all these videos that I create for you guys, I try to give you as much information as possible, but the biggest point, guys, is never allow yourself to be overwhelmed. Never allow yourself to be overwhelmed, which creates decision paralysis, which creates, non-productivity. Because what happens, guys, is if you have 1 choice, 2 choice, 3 choice, 4 choice, 5 choices, then you're going to choose none of them. That is why ClickFunnels is so successful, because it drives customers to one choice, right? That when I first launched my Amazon FBA course, I thought that, everybody was going to love it, that I created 8 different modules that you could get individually if you only needed help with PPC, or you only needed help with listing optimization, or you only needed help with product research, right? And I spent a ton of time and effort creating that because no one else had it. And then I realized, right, 80-20 rule, that 80% of my sales were coming from 20% of my efforts, which was my full course, all in one package, right? People do not like multiple decisions. Never allow yourself to be overwhelmed. So whichever one of these strategies that I talked about resounded most closely to you. So maybe you've noticed that willpower really truly is a muscle. Maybe you recently went to the gym and you felt how hard it was for the first week, but then you really stuck with it and you kind of grinded out that first week and you noticed it start to get a little bit easier. So maybe the willpower is a muscle technique that I was talking about resonated most closely with you. Or maybe no 0 days did. Maybe you sat down to write a paper, or you had to start a huge project for work and it was overwhelming and you were dreading it and you had no motivation to do it, and you were sitting on your TV and that you were just not being productive, right? But you sat down and you wrote one sentence, or you wrote your name, and then maybe it was time to stop, or maybe you wrote a little bit longer, or maybe you noticed how much easier it was once you kind of sat down and actually started to do it. Or maybe you were working on a large project and you realized that you didn't put enough time planning into that project. Maybe you realized in your own life that maybe you should have planned your kid's birthday a little bit better so that the clown didn't like burn your house down or something like that, right? So there's all of these different methods that I try to present to you. I try to give you guys the most value I can possibly stuff into one YouTube video. But the biggest, most important point, if the one thing that you're going to listen to over this whole entire video is, do not ever let yourself get overwhelmed, right? So find your focus. What resonated out of everything I talked about strongest with you, and then put that into action, guys. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed with all of these different choices. Choose the one that was most important to you and put it immediately into action, guys. And I have homework for you, and this is hopefully going to be good homework, not homework like high school or college that you're dreading or anything like that. So your homework for me is I want you guys to be my accountability partner. So I told you personally that for the next 30 days, for the first 30 minutes of every day, I am going to work on nothing but YouTube. I'm going to have my phone on silent, on airplane mode, right? Your homework, I want you to comment below and I want you to tell me, what are you going to focus on, right? What is going to be your 30-31? What is the most important aspect of your life, right? What are you going to really put your time and energy in the most productive hours, which is the morning hours of your workday? What is going to be your game changer? So tell me in the comments, guys. I love more than anything hearing from you, right? It's my 20% that gives me the 80% of my happiness, right? So tell me in the comments, what is going to be your game changer? How are you going to focus your life? And how are you going to double your productivity and double your life? So I will see you guys next time. Please make sure that if you did enjoy this video, that you do click that subscribe button with the notification bell so that you will be up to date on every single new That Lifestyle Ninja video, where I'm only going to continue bringing you the absolute best content that I possibly can, guys. So I will definitely see you next time.